Good afternoon. Be right there. And if you could give me a check that you can see the snow still in my garden and hear my voice, that'd be great. All right, let's get started. Let me pop out the chat. So as you can see, ground is still frozen. I think we're like on the 7th day of freezing days and freezing nights. I've not been able to go out into the garden and shoot my garden ramblings because everything is just covered in snow. So usually we get snow here, I don't know, 4 or 5 days later it's gone, but it's around. So today's light topic as we do the mentoring Q&A is really on brassicas. So I'll talk a little bit about those and seed starting. The main thing that I wanted to highlight for the brassicas, your kale, collards, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels, whatever else falls into that family. Generally speaking, most of your cool weather crops, but the brassicas, you don't need to use a heating pad on them. If you use a heat mat and you raise that temperature for seed starting past 65 degrees Fahrenheit, kind of what houses sit at, the plants are going to get tall and leggy. And it's not because of lack of light, it's really due to too much warmth. And even at that 60, 65 degrees, you know, my plants are kind of leggy. So we have kale here, not so bad, but even the broccoli is kind of up and flopping. Now, I started a lot of seeds because these are for future videos. I'm going to thin these down to one plant. But these will get really tall and just flop over, and it's because of the warmth. They like to grow really in temperatures like 55 degrees. So seed starting your brassicas and a lot of your cool weather crops where it's cooler can give you benefit for a more stocky plant. All right, so that was the main point because people get confused because their brassicas, even their lettuces and stuff, get really tall and flop over, and it's because sometimes they're using a heating mat. So spinach won't even germinate if you get really past 85 degrees. So you want coolness for the cool weather crops, brassicas specifically. So any questions or anything out there? Please throw them out there. Dawn, okay. So I was going to say any blue stars are brand new. So welcome, Dawn. I see people did that already. So she can have the first question. No pressure. There are no bad questions. There are no redundant questions. There are no silly questions. The whole point of the mentoring Q&A is to help you kind of move along in real time in your garden. And the people here are smart with respect to gardening. I will say smart in general, but with respect to growing food, and they can help you out for sure. And I'm just cruising through here to see if any questions were thrown in. So, I mean, that was the other part I was going to talk about is when do you plant cauliflower and broccoli? So, um, Julie, do you mean for seed starting indoors? Just clarify that, but I'll answer both. So your cauliflower, your broccoli, your cool weather crops like to go out when that top 2 inches of the soil, couple of inches, is really around 55 degrees. That's really going to help them take off and start growing. So the first thing you have to be thinking about is whatever you're growing indoors, how many weeks do you want it to be growing indoors, and what are the outdoor temperatures going to be like in your containers, in the ground? If the temperatures are too cold, more so for the warm weather crops, but even so for some of the cool weather crops in your broccoli and your cauliflower, the plants can kind of just sit there and not do a whole lot. They can take a frost, light freeze, but you really want to time it so they're getting out when the temperatures are warming for the cool crops, getting to that 55, 60 degree soil temperature, days that are a little bit warmer so that they take off and grow. So that's the first thing you start with is when do you want them to be in your garden? I'm going to plan to get some out probably around late March. So I want to plant my brassicas, cauliflower, broccoli specifically about now in another week. They can be about 6 weeks old, 8 weeks old from putting the seed into the starting mix. You don't really have to over worry about that. But what I am doing is I'm doing that experiment again where I've got broccoli, kale, spinach in a smaller container, in a larger container. And the more material you have for growing in the containers, the more soil, the stronger and bigger the plants get. With the idea being, and I'm moving more towards this just from experience. I'm sure other YouTubers talk about it too. I really want to grow better roots and not so much upper growth. It's fine to have upper growth. You need that, of course, for the sun photosynthesis. But a good root system really establishes more quickly outdoors and really makes that plant take off and get to size. So to answer your question, I start my cauliflower and broccoli about 6 to 8 weeks now in larger containers before it's good to go outside. What temperatures do they like for germination? 65 is good. My temperatures are about 65. With the grow light, sometimes it's a little bit warmer. I'm keeping my house cooler. They're still a little bit leggy. The thing is as you get colder, they take longer to germinate, but once they germinate, they grow less leggy. So if you have the opportunity to regulate the growing space, maybe 65 to get them germinated and then drop it down to like 55. But you don't have to worry about it that much. All the seed starts around 65 that are in the Brassica family, they're going to be fine. It's just when you use the heat mat and you're pushing the temperatures up to 70, 75, 85, they're just going to get really tall and leggy, and they're going to be hard to use and save. Question, you think changing the cool weather crops to LED lights instead of the older lights that have heat? Yeah, I think that does matter. So some of your older bulbs that weren't the white light emitting diodes, LED, generate more heat, and that will cause the seeds, the germinated, the seedlings, let me start over, will cause the seedlings to really stretch and get taller. The big difference is going from that 65 or less to that 75 to 85. That's what you really want to avoid. Yeah, so planting out into the garden, I'm targeting sort of end of March, middle of March. I'm going to try and grow some, put some out sooner too. Maybe warm the area by putting down a black disc or plastic around the roots. And you guys know the trouble I have with the broccoli and the cauliflower is that they do really well, and then the heat comes really quickly, and it's hard for me to get a nice, solid, head of broccoli or cauliflower. Any other questions? And if you're, here in Maryland, doing, and the reason that you start the brassicas indoors is because right now, like when you look outside, that's what the ground looks like. So this has given me a 6, 8, maybe 10-week jump on the season, because if I put these seeds outside, even if I'm trying to do, growing in a milk jug or something like that, it's just way too cold. So those seeds are going to take weeks to germinate, where they take, what were these? These are put into the ground on 1/5. Today's 1/17. So 12 days, they're already this size. So if you put the seeds outside, even if you're winter sowing, they can take 3-4 times longer to germinate. So just because you get the seeds out doesn't mean you're going to get germination out there. So we're germinating indoors and we're getting them growing. That's why you don't necessarily have to worry about, is the plant 5 weeks old, 6 weeks old, 8 weeks old. You just want to get that growth going and you want a nice root system. And then the same thing, when you're putting them outdoors as transplants, you want that warmer couple inches of soil, the upper part where the roots are. Just on a side note too, I was thinking, in the past and for years, and most you guys might agree with this too, and a lot of people on YouTube and blogs and articles say to plant, grow a nice big tomato transplant, dig a hole nice and deep, plant half the stem or 2/3 the stem. When you drop that root ball of the tomato down 6-8 inches into the soil, you're getting to where it's cold. And the cold soil will slow the root growth, which then will slow the upper growth. So I've been experimenting over the last 2 years, just putting my transplants in the top 2 to 4 inches, just the root system. And the tomatoes, I think, are taking off and growing better because the sun warms that top 2-4 inches. Warm roots, better root growth. Warm roots signals the plant to grow more and everything does better. So just be aware of that. When you drop a root system down, especially for peppers and tomatoes, to a depth that is colder than that top couple of inches, you're going to slow the growth of your plant until warm rains come and warm up the soil and all that kind of stuff. The broccoli that I grow is, I believe, artwork. It's a hybrid artwork variety. I'm terrible with remembering names. But I basically look for any broccoli that is quicker to form heads. Maybe smaller heads, but quicker to mature. So I'm always looking for cauliflower, for Brussels, for broccoli that form quicker so that I can, get the harvest. And I still haven't figured it out yet. I think last year was okay. The year before, using shade cloth with my broccoli really worked well. So I'm going to be doing that early on for some of these brassicas that I'm growing. So the Rebecca, I was going to say too. So if you have a tomato plant that gets tall and whatever, plant the root ball that is there just shallow. And then you can drop the plant over and bury it, some of the stem in that top 2 inches. That works. Or you can let it grow and you just let it drop. Maybe there's a big bend in the stem, but that would be like weeks later. Bury part of the stem. The interesting thing is, let's use this as an example. Say, these are where your roots are on your tomato plant, the black. And they grow out and they grow surface and they'll grow down and they'll do everything they need because tomatoes are a vine. And if this was the surface of the soil, let's say, they're going to do great. When you plant this down deeper, what's interesting is you would think roots would form all along here, but they actually just send roots out in that top area where the 2 inches are. So you have a bunch of roots down here, bare space here, and then new shallow roots up here. So the tomato plant doesn't even want to grow deeper down. It sends out the shallow roots, and the shallow roots are what collect water and food and all that kind of stuff. And they're naturally a vine, so they're built to kind of flop over wherever the vine touches, roots out. That is a way to get more tomatoes too. If you let one vine crawl everywhere and you don't prune it, you're going to have a 4-foot by 8-foot plot of one tomato vine that has taken over the whole place. Now it's unruly, kind of messy. Diseases come and go, but the plant keeps going, so you get a lot of production. Kim, I am planning to grow 4 to 6 weeks for my tomato plants. Let me go get an example. So these, oh, I showed you the date, but these have been growing indoors. I mean, look how thick they are. Here's my hand. Here's a Sharpie. How old do you think these are? So to answer your question, these were planted on December 2nd. Today is the 17th. So that is, what, 6.5 weeks from, and look, a seed just, oh, that's a pepper plant. Here it is. So here's a tomato plant that, what am I talking about? No, that's the pepper plant. I pulled it out. But, you know, these germinated real quickly. They're maybe 7 weeks old. This is a beautiful tomato plant grown in a shallow tin, ready to go outdoors. It's already flowering. Like you can see the flower buds here and right there, you know. So I am in a school of 6 weeks from putting the seed in. The bigger the container, the bigger your plant's going to get. The more space it has to grow, the bigger the plant's going to get. And this translates into what I was talking about for getting the plants, you know, outside into the right temperature. And these are just beautiful. So sometimes, like, there was a stray tomato plant here that germinated like 3 weeks after these. I pulled it out. But sometimes your seeds will germinate at a different time. But those are, I think, amazing. And they're flowering. And I wish I could save them. But anyway, a long-winded way to say 6 weeks. If you want to warm the ground, clear plastic works, black plastic works. You should make sure that it's pressed against the ground so that the heat, if it's clear plastic, the sun's going to go through there, the plastic will keep it in. If it's black, it's going to absorb the heat. You want it to contact the soil. Also, like if you're going to a your tomato bed, if you put down black plastic early, like maybe you're not going to really plant till, say, May 1, if you put black plastic down 3 weeks before and really warm that space, that helps too, if you need to have a jump on the season. You know, if you have a long growing season, a lot of stuff can be grown for a shorter time indoors, can be direct seeded. If you have a shorter growing season, you want better transplants, and you have to do all the tricks to really improve to really increase the growth of your plant so you get a harvest before that frost comes in and rolls in. The roots are going to be entangled. I am just going to cut that, well, I would cut that into squares. Just grab a mound and just, you know, gently wiggle them out and plant them. There's going to be a little bit of shock, but it's a big clump of roots. Theoretically, we'd be getting into the warm space of the garden, and they're going to adjust and be okay. And the thing that I'm talking more about now for seed starting indoors, and just started a video on harvesting radishes and stuff that were indoors. I don't have the radishes up here. No, I took them downstairs to eat them. Is that you don't have to grow stuff indoors for as long as I used to think we had to be, as long as we were led to believe. It can be much shorter, and you can get them into the garden at the right temperature, which saves you work. It allows you to grow more indoors and move them out quickly. So, you know, the key for what I'm going to be talking about is better roots, you know, stocky upper growth, and shorter frequency of time indoors. All of my stuff is fed with water-soluble fertilizer. I use AgroThrive, which I recommend, but I also have other things that I buy for videos that I use sometimes. And the whole idea is that these are all just being fed. There's no organic granular in the starting mix. Not really any worm castings except when I made a video. So I'm not putting anything in the seed start mix. You can if you want, but if you put in the organic granular, because there's no soil life in there, it feeds the plants a little bit, but it tends to mold and get fungus on it, which doesn't hurt your plants, but it's just not necessary. Worm castings are always good. They're a little bit expensive, you know, for budgets at times. You don't need it. Water-soluble fertilizer, just cutting the dosing down so that it's around a 5.55 NP and K. When the plants are small, like the Brassicas over here, these have been growing for 12 days. They've not been fed, so I'll probably feed them this week. Low amount of a water-soluble fertilizer. When plants get bigger, like this, maybe they're getting fed every, I don't know, 7 days or something like that. But the idea is slow and steady with a low amount of a water-soluble. If your plants look a little bit yellow, give them a little bit more. You don't need as much when the plants are smaller. Fertilizers can concentrate in the soil mix and cause a problem. So, you know, the tomato plants that you see, they're getting fed every week with a water-soluble fertilizer. And I don't know if there's any yellowing on here. So, can you see that? That's because I wasn't feeding them well enough. So I just increased the amount of fertilizer, and the upper growth has all figured it out and everything is fine, you know. But I want to see, when I see this sign, I want to know that it's because I'm underfeeding, not because I've overfed. When you overfeed plants, they can look like you underfed them, and then we panic and we give them more water and more food, and then we kill them. When they're getting, you know, to a good size, a regular feeding makes a huge difference. All right, let me see if I missed any questions. No, I think I got them all. So, of course, any other questions, throw them out. I mean, we are, you know, using this format to talk about anything. So it could be tomatoes, peppers. You know, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about with the Brassicas is the warmth indoors. Other tricks that you can do is you can get them seed started, like, you know, I mean, and I'm just going to go in and pull out all of them but one. And that's going to be the guy that I keep. And it's a little bit lanky, but it's going to be fine. But I could grow these indoors for like the 12 days. They're germinated, they're growing, they look pretty good. And then with the temperatures are outside, like let's just say 45 degrees or warmer during the day. These could get them acclimated a little bit. They have to get used to the sun real quick. Not as much as if they would have been in here for 6 or 8 weeks. But this flat then could go outside during the days when it's over 45, come in at night. It's going to be that cool period. These are going to grow nicely doing that process, and they're not going to be taking up any room under my grow lights. So you can do a hybrid of sort of kind of winter sowing. We're germinating where it's warm, and then we're getting, and you could do it like if they all germinate after 5 or 7 days and they just break the surface, you don't have to wait this long to get them outside. You could put them outside right away. You won't even have to acclimate the plants. But you could kind of do a hybrid of indoor seed starting and outdoor seed starting and just kind of let them go. Even if a frost came, they're going to be okay because they're brassicas. But that's another way to grow. I'm starting on my kale now. I like the kale. I like the dwarf curled, which is this one. Dwarf blue vats or something right here. I enjoy kale. I eat that the most. So I'm going to have a lot of kale this year at different times in different places. Dawn, question. Last year I built tall raised beds, filled 2/3 with tree stumps, wood chips, then a third with topsoil and compost. Very poor growth of just about everything. Is the problem likely the soil? Yeah, so let me just think about it. I generally recommend that the bottom third would be tree stumps and wood chips. And then the middle third would be sort of, it could be clay soil, it could just be cheap bag topsoil, anything that's earth. And you can mix compost in there if you want. The final third would be quality soil, compost, peat moss blend. If you're putting the compost on top, you have to make sure the compost is 100% broken down, or it's going to take nutrients, nitrogen from your plants, basically out of the soil until it fully decomposes. So with the setup that you did, you might have the roots growing into the wood chips and stuff. Those wood chips and stuff down at the bottom, 2/3, are taking the nitrogen from your soil so that the microbes can grow and eat and digest and decompose all that wood material. So you have to have a good amount of soil up top for the root systems to grow into, where nothing is challenging your plants for nitrogen. The way to get around it, it should have dropped a little bit. Put in some quality stuff up top, but really soak it in with a water-soluble fertilizer high in nitrogen. This way, you got plenty of nitrogen. It can go to wherever it has to go, and digest the wood and all that kind of stuff. But there'll be enough nitrogen behind for your plants. And if you notice a plant struggling from the get-go, just hit them with the water-soluble fertilizer that you're using. If that didn't make sense, just ask for a clarifying answer. And I think I have videos on it. I don't remember what I call it, but it might have just been the 1/3, 1/3, or 1/3. So 1/3 is the wood and material that has to completely break down. The upper 2/3 is stuff the plants can actually grow in, the middle being not the best stuff, and then the upper third, quality stuff. Karen, if you can get the garlic into the earth, you can plant it now. It seems that some YouTubers start peppers indoors much earlier than other plants. When do you start yours indoors and then plant them outside? So peppers take longer. I have grown them for 12 or 14 weeks. Super hots, I like to grow 10, 12 weeks before they go out there. I have an unheated greenhouse now and a sunken cold frame where I dug out earth about 2 feet deep. So I get stuff out a little bit more. But I would, in theory, start peppers really around the beginning of February. And that would give me 8 to 12 weeks, depending on what I want to do. You do kind of want them to grow longer. Super hots, longer. Banana peppers, maybe shishito, something like that, tend to grow quicker. Maybe they'd only be indoors 8 to 10 weeks. But it's getting close to technically when I would officially start peppers indoors. And if you plant the peppers in larger containers, they're going to do pretty well. Let's see what time. Okay, we're at 12:30. Let me go get some peppers. So these are shishitos that, and the ones over here took longer to germinate. I don't know why. These were planted on November 27th. This is a pretty good size. So what is that? November 27th, December 27th, 4 weeks. Probably these are maybe what, 6-7 weeks old. You know, another 3 or 4 weeks. These are going to be really nice size pepper transplants. This is the small cell. They don't look, let's see if I can do this. They don't look too much smaller than the ones over here. But in the next several weeks, the peppers that have more soil are going to get bigger and larger compared to these, because at this point the roots are starting to get constrained. So when you're picking the amount of time that you want to grow your peppers, think about the size of the container. You know, these can just stay in here for that 8, 10 weeks, even 12 weeks. I don't need to change them. These, as they get closer to that 8th, 9th week, probably will have to be potted up. Now, say these were 12 weeks old and I put them out early into cold soil. They're not going to do much. They're just going to sit there. If these were just 8 weeks old and I started them after these and I put them out when the soil was nice and warm, the plants here will catch up to the bigger plants that were put out when the soil was cold. You know, close enough. Just because it's not only about how long your plants grow indoors, but it's getting them into that warm soil. Meaning, if let's just say I started peppers January 1st and I grew them all the way to May 1st indoor and they're nice and big. And then I started peppers, say, I don't know, February 1st, and they're smaller. But on May 1st, when I put them both out, the soil is cold. They're not going to do a whole lot. And then they're just going to struggle. If I followed up with peppers 2 or 3 weeks after I put these big plants in that I've been taking care of indoors and the ones that I started a little bit later, the pepper plants that might only be 6 weeks old going into that warmer mid-May, late May soil are going to catch up to those peppers relatively close. So you don't have to spend so much time growing stuff indoors only to get them into the wrong soil temperature. And I'm stressing that now because that's what we've kind of grown up just thinking bigger plants after last frost, get them in the ground. And it's a little more complicated than that. Yeah, Don, I mean, year one, and I'm still learning, and you just heard me how I've changed how I grow stuff after doing this for, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years or something like that. So things are always changing. Anytime if you have a lot of new beds and if they're struggling, go ahead and hit them with a water-soluble fertilizer. The water-soluble, in case you don't know, means the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are immediately available to the plant. Question to add to the garlic question. Can elephant garlic be planted in late winter, early spring? So I know that elephant garlic is not technically a garlic. So I don't know how cold hardy it is if it gets a little freeze to it or cold temperatures. Probably you can, but I might just go with early spring. But I'm not really familiar with how it grows. The variety of broccoli I like is Artwork, Artwork, if I have the name right. But I really just buy whatever broccoli usually is a hybrid that matures the quickest. Nina, I had some seedlings I was experimenting with, but when I got sick in December, they got pretty beaten up. They're only like 2 inches tall. Any chance for recovery? So it is now the 17th. Well, it depends. I mean, if they got beaten up and they're constrained in the roots and they're, not looking good, probably start over. If they've just kind of And it also depends on what you're growing. So for instance, you might have a plant that only gets this big, but it's been sitting and growing for 8 or 10 weeks, and now it's going to switch over to flowering, even though it's a little bonsai plant. So if it's a plant that's not really going to try and get to flowering and maybe it's just messed up timing wise, you could try and save them. I mean, maybe if you throw out there what type of plant you're growing, I can answer it better. Peppers are best to go out into the garden when that top 2 inches is like 65 degrees. How do you figure that out? You know, when you get the days trending into the upper 60s and 70s, you're getting warm rains. The nights are staying in the upper 50s. You're getting to that point where that top 2-4 inches is warming up. For me, I mean, I just pick May, you know, end of April, May. It doesn't have to be like consecutive days of heat. It just has to be a sunny day. 75 beating down on that top inch of soil is really going to warm it up quickly. You could plant, like I can't plant garlic now because the ground is frozen. So if you were, I mean, it's going to be hard. You have to be able to get the garlic 2-4 inches deep into the soil. If you can work the soil, yes, but I'm pretty sure it's frozen solid. So I think you've missed it. And I would just wait and plant it in the spring. In the spring, there's two kinds of garlic, hardneck and softneck. Softneck is what we usually get from California. You can, you know, get the softneck garlic at your organic stores, at your grocery stores. I would go with the softneck garlic as early in spring as soon as you can work the soil. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, the ground is frozen solid, so we can't really do much. I'm looking for, I never plant my garlic anything. If you can work the soil, you can put them into the ground now. It doesn't matter where you're at, really. You know, and if you're talking early spring and you have hardneck garlic needs a cold period. So it's not going to be the best if you plant hardneck varieties in early spring. So you'd want to throw those into the refrigerator now and let them chill and be cold and fool them, making them think that they're outside. All right, so we're at 12:41. You know, I can stay on till 1 o'clock, assuming that we have more questions. So that was pretty much my presentation for the brassicas. Um, you know, any other thoughts, questions? Please throw them out there. I'm just watching the chat now. I think I've talked myself out. I mean, there's really, I can't even go and shoot my garden rambling videos out there, but I'm looking forward to the the warmth coming of late February, March, so I can get potatoes out there. And I think I just saw somewhere polar vortex is coming. Don't know if that means um, here in the East Coast or if it's approaching somewhere else. But from what I saw buzzing through some news was a cold period's coming. I've not grown Romanesco before, so I don't have any tips. The big gross worms that like broccoli, if you're talking about the green worm, um, I mean, the tips is to cover it with a row cover because they're usually eggs that are laid on there by that white moth that flies around. And then also to spray with neem oil every 10 to 14 days ahead of time, or use an organic dust ahead of time. So anytime it comes to pests or diseases, you want to keep a journal of when they show up. And then you want to go about 2 weeks before that, 3 weeks before that, and start your prevention. And that helps reduce the damage. You can never get rid of problems, but you can really reduce the damage down greatly to, get more of a harvest. All right, so the polar vortex is going to roll through here. So looks like we can't plant garlic in Maryland for till the spring. All right. Will you be doing any book talks, signings in the Baltimore area in the next month? Not in the next month or so. I'm not sure for the spring or summer. Some people have asked me to, but they're on dates when I'm not going to be here. So they fill up pretty quick. So I don't know. How early should I get my Japanese beetles traps out? I want to catch them early. Well, you earlier for Japanese beetles doesn't matter because they're all grubs in the ground. So they're not gonna. You can't catch them until they come out of the ground. So as soon as you see the first one, put your traps out. That's what you would do with the Japanese beetles. When will you start slug prevention with the pellets? So that's a good example of what I'm talking about. So as soon as the temperatures start getting into the 50s during the days and the freezes are going away at night, which is usually like, I don't know, mid-March to late March, slugs and snails come out. So I start really maybe around then, but definitely by April 1st here in Maryland, and I will put them out and just scatter them. Don't pile the pellets around. Scatter them around, and then I will do it again probably in 3 weeks, like around, say, April 21st. That gets the baits out there, and a lot of the first wave of slugs will die off. Now you could have second waves and third waves of hatching eggs and all that. So I will do it again in March when it's definitely warm enough, and then that really controls the problem in my garden. And then about once a month I have to stay on it or the slugs can get back out of control. And if you have time, I mean, trying to sit down and think about what diseases came, what pests came to your garden, look it up, read about it, see when they show up in your area, learn about the life cycle. Because the other thing that is important is, like, for instance, the squash vine borer has a short life cycle. So you can plant early in May, get some zucchini, squash. Then they come in, they kind of devastate, but you can keep planting, May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, August 1st in here in Maryland, even August 15th, and you plant through the life cycle of the squash vine borer, and you can get production. Versus what happens is we put a lot of stuff in May, problems come, kill off our stuff late June, and we get discouraged. Just replant. That is a great strategy to keep harvest coming into your garden. One interesting thing I'm doing this year is I just ordered syringes, garden syringes, and BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's BT. It's organic, and I'm going to be injecting that into the base of my zucchini plants and other squash plants to kind of, prevent that vine borer from taking hold. Learning about was my point. So the vine borer is like a black, I think it's a moth, but it's got like a red bottom with abdomen with black dots on it. It's kind of cool looking. They're easy to spot. When you see that, you know you have the vine borer flying around your garden. I have not grown stocks flowers. I don't know what that is. And the pest, I mean, don't get too discouraged. I mean, the pests and diseases are going to come. I think I might actually make this a public video later just so people can see what we do here for the Perk mentoring Q&A too. But don't get too discouraged. Like, the garden is going to produce. So, like when Don was talking about the plants struggling, now the addition of nitrogen will make a difference. Water soluble nitrogen. If you know that you've got Japanese beetles showing up, you have the traps ready. If you know that the squash vine borer, or you learn about the insect in your area, is really active late June to August 1st, and then it goes away, plant again August 2nd. Well, you could actually, if the life cycle ends on the 1st of August, let's say, you can plant your squash really 2 weeks before that, because they're not going to mess with young plants typically. So you can get your next wave of plants maybe halfway through the insect's life cycle, so that they kind of go away, and then your plants are up, they're a good size, and then they take off. You don't have to wait, that's my point, for the cycle to end to put your first seeds in. Or you can be growing transplants somewhere. But if you learn the cycles of your plants, if you learn the cycles of the pests, you can put your plants in around the cycle. Any other questions or thoughts? The next Perk event, what's today? The 17th? Will be January 21st, a Tuesday, 3 p.m. We'll talk about acclimating your indoor seed starts to the sun. And that will be the next event. So it's January 21st. It's a Tuesday, 3 p.m. Whoops. All right. I think we'll wrap up there. I'll just kind of chat for a minute or two in case you guys have a last question. Oh, there we go. If I ultimately want 2 of a plant, how many seedlings should I start? Like 4? Well, I mean, you could start 2, and if they both come up, you have 2 plants. It's not a bad idea to start 4, with the idea that if they're a challenging plant, maybe they don't all germinate or something dies off. But you can usually plant the number you want, and then like 2 extra plants, maybe. In a cell, I put in, the other way to do it is instead of just 1 seed, I'll put in 2 or 3 seeds. So you're just wanting to get enough you just want to get enough that germinate, so you have the number of plants that you want to grow. My onions, I'm going to grow 6 or 8 weeks indoors before they go out into the garden. So I'm thinking I want to get them out like March 15th. So that would be about now. So no, I did start some onions for videos, but I'm going to really start the bulk of mine really this week, and that will give me about 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks to the target date. I used to grow them longer, and there's really nothing wrong with it. You can start and have them 8-10 weeks, and maybe I'll grow them a little bit longer, get them out closer to April. But what I was doing, and I felt, was that they were getting to be close to 12 weeks, and I thought that it was maybe affecting the way the onion bulbs. So I want them a little bit younger, going out into the garden. So, 6-8 weeks. Um, let's just make it clear. 8 weeks is a good amount of time. Put the seeds in. 8 weeks later, you have your transplants ready to go out. All right, I will see you guys on the 21st. Enjoy the polar vortex is coming. And before you know it, we will be out in the garden. I did get a video. I think maybe Rebecca, you sent that to me. But because of the snow and frozen ground, I haven't been able to do my garden ramblings outdoor. But garden ramblings will now have Perk member videos at the end if you're in that tier Perk memberships. All right.